The fork starts tapping on my plate before my hand moves. My name is Michael DeLuca. In '44 I was a staff sergeant with 3rd Platoon, Bravo Company, 351st Infantry, up in an Italian hill village that fed us in a stone cellar. They said the village remembered every dead man who ever ate there. At night you could hear which chairs scraped for the living, and which scraped for the ones who'd already gone. Now, I sit alone at this little laminate table in the assisted living dining room, the kind with cheerful posters on the walls and chairs that squeak instead of scrape. My hands are on my lap. My right thumb follows the groove where my wedding ring used to be. The plate in front of me is white with a blue rim. Chicken, mashed potatoes, some overcooked peas. The fork handles itself, just a little. A soft metallic click, tap, 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 3 times, right on the rim. I know that sound. In my head, it doesn't come from this plastic tabletop, under fluorescent buzz. It comes from rough wood, candlelight, and stone walls that sweat in winter. I smell garlic and red wine vinegar and wet wool instead of lemon disinfectant. I see a woman's hand, thick fingers, flour on the knuckles, smacking the table once and saying something in Italian, my surname in her mouth, the old village way. Not DeLuca the New Jersey way. DeLuca, the way my grandfather said it, with the L caught in the back of the throat. The fork lies still again. The nurse at the next table laughs at something on her phone. Someone drops a spoon. My heart is beating too fast for a room this quiet. Mr. DeLuca, you all right? The orderly pats my shoulder as he walks by. He smells like soap and cheap aftershave. Fine, I say. Plate's just noisy. He keeps going. He doesn't see the extra impression on the opposite side of the table, where no one is sitting. A faint dip in the plastic runner, the way the surface bows under a weight that isn't there. I tilt my head. Listen. Clatter and hum of 100 old people eating cartwheels. The murmur of the TV in the common area. Under that, very low, the wet, steady sound of a ladle pouring sauce onto plates, one after another. A rhythm, like roll call, you can eat. 3 taps for another plate. 3 taps for another name. They're serving again. I look down at my plate, and the peas are not peas anymore. They're little dark green capers, dotted with oil and lemon zest. The smell of garlic climbs up and cuts through my nose, sharp and clean. I blink. The peas are back. The room is as it was. The fork twitches toward the empty chair. I know where I am. The sign outside says Mapleview Senior Residence. The calendar on the wall says it's Thursday. Bingo night. The taxi driver who brought my daughter here last week called this place nice. My daughter cried in the hallway when she thought I was asleep. But the table in front of me belongs to that village, and it has started counting its dead again. The nurse calls out something about coffee. The TV laughs. The fork lies still again. I can smell garlic stronger now. Oregano, burnt cheese at the edge of a pan. I hear you, I murmur, too low for anyone human. I hear the kitchen. I remember. My left knee aches when I shift. Weather coming. Rain on the roof sounds like mortar fire when my hearing aid's battery runs low. The chair cushion wheezes. That village was farther south than anyone thought we'd get intact. Stone houses clinging to a hillside above a river that ran brown with spring melt. A church with a cracked bell. A road that twisted like a knife between rock and vineyard. The maps called it San Martino al Fiume. The locals called it something else under their breath. Paesi della Tavola? Village of the Table? The first time I heard the name, I was standing in mud up to my ankles, watching a mule refuse to move. Non vuel ander, the old man said, slapping the animal's flank with his cap. Hapora, la tavola, non, lo vuel. I understood every other word back then. My mother made sure I didn't lose the language. Why's the table angry at a mule? I asked, in Italian that made the guys chuckle. An American sergeant, talking like someone's uncle. The old man spat. Nan e per lui. E per voi. Not for him. For you. Move him anyway, Lieutenant Harris said. shaking a cigarette out of the pack with his teeth. Harris was 24 and looked 14. Thin face, sharp nose, helmet too big. We're losing daylight. The mule rolled its eyes, whites showing. Its breath steamed in the cold. The harness creaked. In the distance, artillery thumped, a slow, patient heartbeat on the other side of the valley. Russo, my radio man, wiped rain off his glasses with the corner of his scarf. Maybe the mule knows something we don't, Sarge. Yeah, I said. He knows the Krauts don't shell mules. Move him, we shoved. The mule slid forward, hooves sucking out of the mud, with a sound like boots, leaving a trail of blood. The old man muttered something that sounded like a prayer and made a sign with his hand, not quite a cross. Pesi della tavola, he said again. La tavola, ricorda. The table remembers. I smelled it before I saw it. Meat stewing, onions sweating in fat, bread baking somewhere underground. After weeks of rations and whatever we could scrounge from farmhouses, the smell worked its way through the damp wool and cordite and dug its fingers into my stomach. Jesus, Corporal Hank Lawson said behind me. I didn't know heaven was in Italy. Hank's helmet had a lucky dent in it from a shell fragment back at San Pietro. He rubbed that dent every time he lit a cigarette. He kept dice in his pocket and rolled them on his mess tin at night, betting cigarettes on numbers he never paid up on. Knock it off, I said, but my mouth was already filling with spit. We came around the last bend, and there it was. San Martino hanging off the slope, houses piled on top of each other, rough stone, clay tiles, little balconies with sheets flapping like surrender flags. The church bell tower stood like a broken tooth. Someone had draped a white sheet where the bells should be, stiff with rain. The road forked at a stone fountain. One branch climbed toward the church. The other ducked under an arch that smelled like wood smoke and wine. That was where the smell came from. That, and the sign swinging from a rusted bracket. Trattoria della Tavola, hand-painted in black on a white board. Below it, in smaller letters, almost worn away by rain, per tutti I vivi, per tutti I morti. For all the living, for all the dead food, Russo said. You see that, Sarge? Real food? Yeah, I said. I see it. Minutes later, we were inside, dripping on the floor. The ceiling was low, wooden beams stained black with decades of smoke. The air was hot and thick. Tables jammed close together, all of them full of people who stopped talking as we walked in. Men with caps in their hands, women with scarves over their hair, forearms dusted with flour, kids with wide, dark eyes that had seen too much. Every face turned toward the door, toward us, toward the muddy boots, the rifles, the helmets with netting still catching pieces of twig. In the back, near a door that led to a cellar, a woman stood with her hands on her hips. She was thick through the middle, hair pinned back tight, apron stained with sauce and meat juice. Her eyes were small and sharp. She took us in with one hard sweep. Americani, she said, like it was an insult and a welcome at the same time. Harris took off his helmet, his hair flattened in sweaty stripes. Yes, ma'am, he said, looking around for God knows what an officer's table. A sign saying we shoot at officers first. She smacked a chair with the flat of her hand. The sound echoed around the room like a shot. Sedatevi, she said. Sit, la tavola, serve tutti. The table serves everyone. Trays came, bowls of pasta, steam rising in curls, meat falling apart in thick sauce, bread with crusts so hard they cracked when you tore them, pitchers of red wine that glowed in the lamplight like diluted blood. The villagers went back to talking, quietly. They watched us eat, like people waiting for a verdict. Hank shoveled food in like he was afraid someone would take the plate away. Sauce smeared his chin. Russo took smaller bites, savoring, closing his eyes each time he chewed. Alvarez, our medic, crossed himself quickly before lifting his fork. He had a rosary around his wrist, the beads worn smooth. Eat, Harris said, trying to sound like an officer who still had control of anything. We move at first light. Battalion wants us on the ridge. Battalion can wait, Hank said around a mouthful. If the Germans were smart, they'd surrender right here and negotiate terms over this sauce. Someone laughed. The tension went down a notch. I wiped my plate with a piece of bread, soaking up every last streak of red. That's when I saw the big table. It sat under a low arch against the far wall. A long, heavy thing, darker than the others. The wood polished by years. 12 chairs on each side, one at each end. 26 seats. Only 3 of them were occupied. An old man with a milky eye, staring into a glass he never drank from. A boy in his late teens with a bandage around his head, asleep with his cheek on his arm. A middle-aged woman whose hair had gone gray in streaks, fingers smoothing a folded piece of cloth. Every place at that table was set. Plates, forks, knives, cups. At each setting, a little strip of cloth folded neatly where a name would be if it were a reservation card. There were names on them, hand-stitched in red thread. My eyes picked out a few. Long, Italian names. Short ones, some with dates under them, some without. At the head of the table, the cloth was blank. "Che coses?" I asked, nodding toward it when the woman with the flower on her arms came by with a basket of bread. She glanced over her shoulder. Her hand tightened on the handle. "La tavola dei morti," she said. "The table of the dead. Restaurants crowded," I said. "You could use the space." She looked at me like I'd suggested lighting the church on fire. "Quelli non vanno via," she said. "Those don't leave. Mangiano quando passano. They eat when they can." Russo nudged me. "What's she saying?" he asked. "Nothing," I said. "Family thing." The woman leaned closer. Her breath smelled like garlic and coffee. "La tavola ricorda," she said. "Tutti quelli che sono passati. Tutti quelli che non sono tornati." The table remembers all who passed through, all who didn't come back. A log shifted in the kitchen stove. Sparks flew. For a second, one of the empty chairs scraped back an inch, all by itself. Russo jerked his head toward the sound. "Did you see floors uneven?" I said quickly. My heart beat hard against my ribs. "Old building. Everything moves." He looked doubtful. He wiped his glasses again. The glass fogged from the heat and the steam. We stayed in San Martino 2 days. The first night, the Germans shelled the ridge above the village, not the village itself. The sky lit up orange. We watched from the doorway of the trattoria, cigarettes glowing like fireflies. The ground shivered under our boots. Somewhere, a baby cried without stopping for 40 minutes. "Think they'll come through here?" Alvarez asked, eyes on the flashes. "Not if they can help it," Harris said. "This place looks like a dead end on the map." The villagers knew better. They moved like people in a house built in a river's channel. Everything they owned seemed to be on wheels or hooks. Crates could become benches. Benches could become stretchers. Doors had latches that opened both ways. The second day, the mule that had refused to move lay dead by the fountain, legs stiff, eyes glassy. No wound, no blood. Flies gathering at the corners of its mouth. Hank spat in the mud. "Things drop dead around here for no good reason," he said. "Maybe I should stop rolling the dice." He rolled them anyway that night, 3 times, 3 sixes. The men around him went quiet after the second. Russo found kids in the alley behind the trattoria. 2 boys and a girl playing with bottle caps, flipping them onto a chalk grid drawn on the stones. They used a small knife to scratch marks into the wall each time a cap landed on a certain square. "Che WWII?" I asked. The older boy shrugged. "E per conter," he said. "It's for counting." "Counting what?" Russo asked. He pointed through the back window at the long table inside. Little red names in a neat row. "Quelli che non tornano," he said. "Those who don't come back." At dusk, the villagers gathered under the arch by the trattoria door. The woman with flower on her arms stood in the center. She held a ladle like a priest holds a chalice. The old man with the milky eye shuffled to the head of the long table. The bandaged boy sat up. The gray-haired woman clutched her piece of cloth like it was skin. Every plate on the table was full. Steam rose from food no one had carried there. Harris stepped closer. "What's going on?" he asked me. "Some kind of blessing," I said. "For the dead." We watched. No one spoke English. They didn't need to. The woman tapped the ladle against each plate once. The sound was clear and sharp. 26 times. Tap, tap, tap. The same spot at the edge of each plate, like a drill. When she tapped the empty one with no name, the sound didn't match. It was dull, wrong, a hollow that made my teeth itch. She looked up, right at me. "You're gonna survive this, Sarge," Hank said behind me, half a joke, half something else. "Old Italian witch just picked you to clear the table for all of us." I didn't answer. I couldn't make my tongue work. The shelling came closer on the third night. I know that because the plates in the trattoria rattled on the tables before we heard the whistle overhead. "Get them downstairs," Harris barked, shoving chairs out of the way. "Basement. Go, go, go." The villagers moved like they'd been drilled. Children first, then the old. The woman with the ladle smacked the long table once. The plates there didn't move. The food didn't spill. "We going to fit in there with them?" Hank asked, gripping his rifle. "We'll make room," I said. "Move." We crammed into the stone cellar under the trattoria. Barrels of wine stacked against the walls. Sacks of flour piled in corners. The ceiling pressed low over our helmets. Oil lamps hissed. Someone had painted saints on the curved stones long ago. Their faces glowed in the flickering light like they were sweating. The air smelled like damp stone, old grapes, fear. Artillery howled in the distance. The ground shook. Dirt sifted down from the ceiling in thin lines. "Hey," Russo said in my ear. "Listen." Above the thunder of shell bursts, above the muttering and crying, there was another sound, delicate, mechanical, the clink of plates, the scrape of chairs. "Upstairs." "No," Alvarez said. "There's nobody up there." "Place is full," Hank muttered. "We're all down here, unless the mules come back from the dead for dinner." A laugh escaped someone's throat and strangled itself halfway out. The woman with the ladle stood near the stairs. The light from the lamp made hollows under her eyes. Her apron was stained, new, and dark. She held the ladle by its neck, like she could swing it as a weapon if she had to. "Cheese alla tavola," she called up the stairs. "Who sits at the table?" The sound stopped for a heartbeat. Then one chair scraped. Long, slow. She closed her eyes. Her lips moved. Names, a list. I caught some of them. Old Italian names. Names with R's and O's and double consonants. At the end of the list, she said one in English. "Henry Lawson." Hank's hand crushed my sleeve. "What the hell?" he whispered. "E piena," she said softly. "It's full." The shell that hit the street outside knocked half the village down. It slammed into the world with a flat roar that punched the air out of my lungs. The lamps went out. Someone screamed. Wine barrels toppled. A wall cracked loud as a rifle shot. Stone dust filled my mouth. My ears rang. My hand found Hank's helmet in the dark. He was breathing fast. I could feel the helmet tremble under my palm. When the dust settled and the lamp was lit again, I saw blood on his cheek. A thin line from temple to jaw. Not deep. A kiss, not a bite. "Damn," he said, touching it with his fingers. "Guess the mule died for me instead." The woman looked at him. Her gaze went to the long table in her mind, not the one upstairs. "Nan ancora," she said. "Not yet." We got orders the next morning. Axis units were pulling back through the valley. There would be a counterattack on the ridge. Our battalion had to hold until armor could get up the goat track they called a road. The Germans had been in and out of San Martino before. They knew the place. They'd use it if they could. "We're setting up a blocking position north of the village," Harris said, tracing lines in the mud with a stick. We stood around him, boots leaving deep prints. "Platoon straddles the road here. DeLuca, your squad covers the left. Russo, you stick to him and keep that radio alive. Alvarez, you go where the bodies fall." "What about the village?" I asked. He looked up at the houses. Smoke still rose from a broken roof. The church's white sheet hung in tatters now. The trattoria sign had one new crack across the word Tavola. Regiment says it's non-strategic, Harris said. If we can keep the fight out of it, we do. If we can't, we do what we have to. The villagers knew something was coming. They moved faster. The woman with the ladle wiped down the long table with a cloth that left damp tracks like fingerprints. The old man with the milky eyes sat there, his hand over one of the name strips. The boy with the bandage folded and unfolded a napkin until it tore. I caught the woman's sleeve as she passed me with a basket of bread. "We'll try to keep them away," I said in Italian. "The Germans, the fighting." She looked at the rifles stacked near the door, the helmets, the radio set in its canvas case, the map on Harris's knee. "La guerra viene Tavola," she said. "War comes to the table." She reached behind her back and pulled something out of her apron pocket. A small strip of cloth, a name stitched on it in red. My name, DeLuca. No date. "When did you do that?" I asked. My tongue felt too big in my mouth. She frowned. "Non ricordo," she said. "I don't remember." "La tavola sa, io recamo." The table knows. I just stitched. She placed the strip on the long table at the head, where the blank cloth had been. The empty seat. The chair scraped back, slowly, as if some heavy unseen body was settling into it. My stomach turned. I grabbed the edge of the ordinary table beside me to keep my balance. "Hey, Sarge," Hank called from the doorway. "We got a schedule to keep if we want to be alive for dinner." I tore my eyes away from the chair. "Yeah," I said. "Yeah, coming." We dug in north of the village. The ground was rocky, terraced with low stone walls that used to corral goats and now corralled men. We scraped shallow foxholes, piling broken stones as parapets. The olive trees around us had branches hacked off for firewood, sharp white stumps, like bones, sticking out of the trunks. Russo set up the radio behind a wall, antenna poking over like a metal weed. He muttered to himself as he checked connections. "If this thing dies, I'm going back to Brooklyn and signing up with the fire department." "You're not in Brooklyn?" I said, jamming my bayonet into the soil, carving a notch to wedge it deeper. "You're here. Keep the line open." Alvarez crouched beside us, rolling bandages, hands steady. "Weather's turning," he said. "Clouds coming in from the west. Good for us, bad for planes. Bad for everything," Hank said, loading another belt into the machine gun. "Can't even see your own dice in this fog." He looked at me and grinned, the line of dried blood on his cheek flaking when his skin moved. The first German patrol came in quiet. We heard them before we saw them. Boots scuffing stone, metal clinking softly, men breathing in cold air through their noses. They moved in a line along the road, shadows in field gray uniforms. "Hold," Harris hissed. "Hold, wait for my mark." My finger tightened on the trigger. Sweat slid down my spine though. The air was cold. Then the wind changed. It came down from the village, carrying the smell of cooking. Meat, garlic, rosemary, wine. The German patrol stopped. Heads turned up toward the houses. One of them laughed, short and sharp. Another said something about Mama and Essen. Food. The smell hit us too. My stomach clenched. The last thing I'd eaten was cold tinned cheese at dawn. The Germans didn't advance. They backed away, slowly. One man crossed himself. They disappeared around the bend, the sound of their boots fading. "What the hell?" Hank whispered. "They got a grandma up there cooking for both sides now." "They've been here longer than us," Alvarez said. "The next ones weren't patrols. They were units." By afternoon, the road was a funnel. Germans falling back, Americans pushing up, all of them trying not to leave bodies in a place that wouldn't forget them. Orders crackled over the radio. "Pull back. Hold. Advance 50 yards. Fall back 20. The line breathed like a lung in bad shape. Fog rolled in off the river as the light died. It climbed the terraces in layers, clinging to the walls, pooling in the hollows. The village above became a blur of orange squares, where windows burned. The bell tower vanished, then reappeared, then vanished again. We're blind, Harris said. DeLuca, you and Russo get up to that low wall by the road. I want eyes on anything that moves. Got it, I said. My boots slipped on wet stone as we climbed. We reached the wall, huddled behind it. The fog flowed over the road like slow water. I could hear engines somewhere, gears grinding, men shouting in German and English. Somewhere, someone laughed too loudly. It broke off in a cough. The smell of cooking was stronger. Smells like your grandma's house, Russo said, voice tight. Yeah, I said. If my grandma's house was surrounded by artillery. We peered over the wall. Figures moved in the fog. Some wore German helmets, rounder and lower. Some wore ours. Some wore no helmets at all. Just caps, scarves, bare heads. Hold fire, I said. We hit the wrong ones. We screw everything. A column emerged. More solid Germans. Helmets, packs. A truck rumbling behind them, loaded with something covered by a tarp. Now Russo asked. Wait, I said. My finger flexed. They're heading for the village. Maybe they'll. The fog thinned for a second, just enough for me to see the trattoria's doorway. Light spilled out onto the street. The woman with the ladle stood there. Her apron was clean now. Her hair was pinned tighter. Her face was set in lines deeper than the ones carved into the hills. She lifted the ladle. The Germans stopped. The officer at the front said something in rough Italian. She answered. He hesitated. The men behind him shifted, restless. Then, like a school of fish changing direction, they turned and went into the trattoria. What in God's name? Russo said. They're feeding them, I said. They're feeding the bastards. Can they do that? He asked. I didn't answer. I watched the last helmet disappear inside. The fog closed around the doorway like a curtain. Minutes later, another column came up the road. American. Our guys. Faces smeared with mud. Sleeves rolled up. Helmets sitting crooked. Harris, I whispered into the radio. You seeing this? Seeing what? His voice crackled back. The Krauts just disappeared in the restaurant, I said. Now our boys are walking right into the same place. He cursed, static swallowing half the words. Orders from regimental, he said. Hold your fire unless they start shooting. That village is neutral ground for civilians, understand? They don't want us blasting it apart if we don't have to. Neutral ground. The second column reached the trattoria. The woman stood there, ladle still. She said something. They laughed. They went in. I heard plates, chairs, forks, tapping, 26 times. Fog thickened. I lost sight of the doorway. Something's wrong, Russo said. How can you tell? I asked. I can't hear anybody leaving, he said. They go in, they don't come out. He was right. No boots on stone, no clank of gear. Just the steady, patient sounds of eating. Then, faintly, underneath that, the scrape of an extra chair being pulled out. Harris hissed in my ear. DeLuca, pull back. They want us consolidating at the church. They're calling San Martino a rally point. I hesitated. The fork at my plate in the far future tapped 3 times. Memory, and now overlapped. The lamplight in the trattoria guttered across decades onto the fluorescent glare of the assisted living dining room. Copy, I said. We're coming in. We fell back to the village. The fog swallowed us. Buildings loomed and vanished. The road under our boots changed from gravel to cobblestone. I could hear voices ahead. Laughter. Someone humming a tune off-key. We reached the fountain. The mule's body was gone. Only the dark stain remained, like a shadow that had forgotten its owner. The trattoria door stood open. Light spilled onto the street. Warm, gold, thick with smoke. Stay here, I told Russo. Radio ready. If you hear shooting, call it in. If you hear nothing in 10 minutes, call it in anyway. He swallowed. You going alone? I know the language, I said. They like me. Maybe. He grabbed my sleeve. Sarge, he said. If your name's on that table, then I'm already seated, I said. Might as well see the menu. I stepped inside. Heat hit me. The air was full of it. Heat from the kitchen, from bodies, from breath. Every table was full. Germans, Americans, villagers, all mixed. Helmets on the floor, rifles stacked in corners. Men in field gray, talking with men in olive drab, animated hands moving. Someone passed bread down a line. Someone else poured wine. Laughter, curses, fragments of songs. At the long table, it was standing room only. Every chair was filled, every plate loaded. The stitched name strips lined up like a new kind of rank. The old man with the milky eye sat where he always sat. The bandaged boy leaned both elbows on the table, hair hanging in his face. The gray-haired woman smoothed her cloth. Some of the faces were familiar. Private Danny McGrath, from 1st Squad, the one who carried his girl's photo in his helmet. Corporal Weiss, who shaved twice a day and shared his razor. The German who had surrendered last week with a picture of his baby in his pocket. The Italian partisan who'd guided us through the orchard. They were all there. All the ones we'd lost in the days before. Uniforms torn, bandages still stained, eyes bright. They were eating slowly, carefully, not wasting a crumb. Every move precise. The woman with the ladle moved behind them, refilling plates that never seemed to empty. Her eyes were lined deeper than they had been that morning. "Signora," I said. My voice sounded small in the noise. "What is this?" She looked at me. Her eyes went to my chest, where my name tape should be. She nodded to the empty chair at the head of the long table. It wasn't empty anymore. Hank sat there. His helmet was off. His hair was slicked back like on the day we shipped out, not matted with sweat like that morning. The line on his cheek was gone. His skin was smooth, almost waxy. His eyes were clear. The dice that should have been in his pocket lay on the table by his plate. He forked up a mouthful of meat, chewed, swallowed. He didn't look surprised to see me. "You're late, Sarge," he said. "Food's good. Germans aren't so bad when they're chewing." "Hank," I said. My throat hurt. "What are you doing at that table?" He looked down at the stitched name strip in front of him. Henry Lawson, under it, a date. "Not today's, tomorrow's. Eating," he said. "What else?" A shell screamed overhead. The whole building shuddered. Plaster cracked along the wall beside the long table. Dust drifted down, landed on plates, dissolved in wine. No one flinched. "Get out," I said. "All of you. This place is going to get hit." No one moved. The fork in Hank's hand tapped his plate 3 times. Tap, tap, tap. The woman with the ladle came to my side. Her fingers gripped my forearm like hooks. "Non puoi portarli via," she said. "You can't take them away. Sono già seduti, they're already seated." Another shell, closer. The lamp above us swung, shadows sliding across faces like masks. Somewhere, a wall gave way with a roar. I grabbed Hank's shoulder. My hand closed on air. He was solid when I looked at him. Flesh, uniform, sweat. But under my fingers, there was nothing. The chair was there. The dice were there. The stitched name strip was there. He was a picture printed on smoke. "Sarge," Rousseau shouted from the doorway. "Incoming." He looked past me. His eyes widened. "Jesus, Mary." He dropped to one knee, arms over his head. I turned. Through the open door, in the fog, I saw shadows moving toward the trattoria. More men, more helmets, some limping, some carried. German and American both. They weren't walking. They were being pulled, slightly, as if their boots slid on a slope no one else could see. The long table extended. It shouldn't have been possible. The wall behind it didn't move. The ceiling didn't rise, but the table lengthened, inch by inch, plates and chairs sprouting along its edge like growth rings in a tree. The woman's hand tightened on my arm until my sleeve creaked. "La tavola, ricorda," she whispered. "The table remembers." The shell that hit the trattoria came in low. I don't remember the sound, just the flash, the pressure, the way the floor jumped, the way the world turned into red and white and black. When I opened my eyes, I was outside, on my back in the mud. The trattoria's front wall was gone. The roof had collapsed inward. Smoke and dust poured out. Flames licked at broken beams. Someone was dragging me by my webbing. My helmet was gone. My ears hissed. My mouth tasted like plaster and blood. "Got you, Sarge," Russo panted. "You're heavy. You know that." Behind him, the church bell tower leaned at a new angle. The white sheet had burned away. The bell itself was visible now, split down the middle. I tried to sit up. Pain clawed down my side. Alvarez appeared, hands already reaching for my ribs. "Stay down," he said. "You got lucky. Shrapnel skipped you and took the wall instead." "The trattoria," I said. "The people inside, we pulled some out," he said. "Not enough. They shouldn't have been cooking with that much artillery around." My head spun. I rolled onto my side and vomited mud and wine and bile. Later, when the fires were out and the smoke had thinned, I went back. The long table lay under half a roof's worth of tile and beam. We cleared the wreckage, piece by piece. Villagers worked beside us, faces gray, eyes set. We found bodies. The old man with the milky eye, crushed under a beam, hand still reaching toward where his glass had been. The bandaged boy, neck at an angle no neck should go. The gray-haired woman, her fingers curled around her piece of cloth, still smoothing it, even in death. We found German bodies, American bodies, villagers, all tangled, all covered in dust, all with their mouths open, as if they'd tried to finish a last bite. We didn't find Hank. His dice were there. One under the table, one in the ashes of someone's hair, both showing 6. The stitched name strips were scattered, some burned, some soaked in wine, some trampled into the mud. Mine lay in the center of the table, untouched, no date under it. The red thread bright. I picked it up. My fingers shook. I put it in my breast pocket, over my heart. The woman with the ladle sat on a broken chair, apron black with soot. Her hands hung at her sides. The ladle lay on the ground, bent. Alvarez started, then stopped. He had no bandages for this. "She stitched new names," the old priest said, standing in the doorway of the half-ruined church. "It is what she does." I looked at him. "Why?" He shrugged. "Someone has to remember," he said simply. Later, in the night, as we tried to sleep in the gutted nave of the church, I heard plates upstairs, soft, persistent, the scrape of chairs, the tap of a fork on ceramic, 26 times, no more, no less. We left San Martino 2 days after that. The war moved north. The ridge we'd bled on became a line on someone's map marked secured. The village became another name in a list of places we'd passed through. We lost more men. Russo took a piece of mortar shell to the throat outside Bologna. He didn't get a stitched name, not that I saw. Alvarez disappeared into a field hospital and never came back to the line. Infection, fever. One day on his feet, the next a rumor. Harris caught a sniper's bullet stepping out of a farmhouse. 1 second he was there, telling me to get my boys moving. The next, he was a heap on the threshold, cigarette still burning between his fingers. They all had their habits, their jokes, their little hopes, their spots at whatever table we could find. I never saw their names in red thread, but some nights, in ruined barns or foxholes carved into slopes that smelled of crushed grass and cordite, I heard the tap of a fork on a plate where there was no plate. 3 times, always 3, years passed. I came home, married, worked in a deli for a while, slicing meat, stacking it on bread, watching people sit at little tables and eat without looking over their shoulders for showbursts. I kept the strip of cloth from San Martino in a box with my discharge papers and a few photographs. Sometimes I took it out, ran my thumb over my name. The thread never faded. My wife liked to host family dinners on Sundays. Long table, plastic cloth, plates lined up, kids shouting, uncles arguing, the TV muttering in the next room. Every now and then, in the middle of the noise, I'd hear a fork tap 3 times on the rim of a plate. No one else ever seemed to notice. When my wife got sick, and the table got shorter, and the plates fewer. I still heard it. Tap, 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 sometimes from an empty chair. I didn't go back to Italy. I thought about it. There were programs, tours, veterans revisiting battlefields. I saw the brochures. Men in caps, standing next to monuments, smiling with their teeth. San Martino wasn't in the brochures. If it was on the maps, it was in small print. Now, in this place, the long table they wheel me 2-3 times a day is laminate over particle board. The chairs are padded and armless. The plates are light, made not to break when old hands drop them. The staff here serve everyone the same portion. They don't care who fought where. They care if you finish your vegetables. But sometimes, like tonight, the smell changes. For a second, the bland gravy on the chicken has wine in it. The mashed potatoes take on the grain of polenta. The air fills with garlic and heat. The fork moves on its own and taps 3 times. I look up. Across from me, in the opposite chair, the cushion dips. At first, there's nothing. Just the sag in the foam, the faint shift in the pattern of light on the table. Then, slow as fog rolling into a valley, shape fills in. A hand, knuckles scarred, dice tucked between finger and palm. Hank. He looks older than he did at that table in San Martino. Lines around his mouth, hair thinner, but it's him. Same grin starting at the corner of his mouth, ready to become a joke that never quite forms. You outlived the date, he says. His voice is clear. Didn't think you'd manage that. I carried this, I say, touching my chest. The cloth is under my shirt even now. I don't remember putting it there this morning, but it's there. Warm against my skin. Maybe that fooled someone. He looks around the dining room. Old people, nurses, the TV, a bingo board on the wall. Tables different, he says. Rules are the same. Behind him, the room shifts. For a heartbeat, Maple View isn't Maple View. It's a low-ceilinged trattoria with beams blackened by smoke. The walls are stone. The air is hot. The long table runs the length of the room, plates lined up, name strips in red. At one end, the woman with the ladle stands. Her hair is whiter, her hands more knotted. The ladle gleams. She taps the plates. Tap, 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 counting. Calling. Who's she serving now? I ask. Hank tilts his head. Listens. Same as always, he says. Both sides. All sides. Everyone who sat once and didn't get to stand back up. I see faces flicker at the long table. German, American, Italian. Faces I know, faces I don't. Young, middle-aged. Every one of them with a plate in front of them. Everyone looking up for a second when the fork taps. One of them is Rousseau. His glasses unbroken, his throat unscarred. He raises his glass in my direction, a little salute. Another is Alvarez, rosary still around his wrist. He nods once. Approval. He looks less tired than he ever did in the field hospital tents. Further down, men I never knew in life. Russians in quilted jackets, British in battle dress, Japanese in worn field caps, a Frenchman with half a mustache, a Polish kid with a scarf, knitted in bright colors. The table stretches beyond the walls, beyond the horizon, into tunnels of light and shadow that don't belong in any building. The smell of food is everywhere. Not fancy, just hot, filling. Enough. Why am I seeing this now? I ask. Hank shrugs. Maybe because you're closer to the table than the barracks, he says. I'm still breathing, I say. Still eating what they serve upstairs. He gestures at my plate. The peas are capers again. The chicken is a slice of roasted meat with crisped edges. The mashed potatoes have turned to polenta. The plastic cup of water is a glass of red wine. Looks like you got upgraded, he says. I look at the nurses. They move in slow motion. Their faces softened. The sound of their shoes on the floor is muted. The TV is a crackle with no images. At the far end of the long table, the woman lifts the ladle and points it at me. Her lips move. My name in thread and in air. Michael DeLuca. The strip of cloth under my shirt warms, then burns. Not pain. Not exactly. A heat that goes inward instead of out. Do I have a choice? I ask. Hank rolls the dice on the table. They spin, they click, they land. 6 and 6. He smiles. You knew the odds when you sat down that first night, Sarge. The chair under me changes. The cushion hardens. The legs grow uneven. The sound of wood on stone climbs up through my spine. The table's edge cuts into my forearms differently. I know this feel. Heavy wood, polished by hands and elbows over years. The room snaps into focus. I'm back in the trattoria. The beams above me are black. The walls are stone. The lamps are oil, not fluorescent. The air is thick, but it doesn't choke me. It fills me. The long table runs in both directions, full of faces. Some I know, some I'll never know. Every plate is set. Every name is stitched. The sounds of battle outside are distant, like a storm over a far ridge. The woman with the ladle stands at my elbow. Her hair is almost completely white now. Her eyes are the same, sharp, measuring. She lays a strip of cloth in front of me. My name, no date. She taps my plate once. The sound rings clear. Seduto, she says. Seated, something eases in my chest. The ache in my knee is gone. The tremor in my hand stops. The fork is light. My fingers are sure. Hank raises his glass. Welcome to the only place on earth the war never left, he says. Further down the table, men shift to make room. The table extends again, just a little. A German corporal nods to a British private. A Russian infantryman passes a basket of bread to a Japanese sailor. An Italian partisan pours wine for a man in a uniform that wasn't even designed when San Martino first smelled cordite. Outside, the world shifts. Seasons turn. Buildings go up, come down. Maps change. Names fade from stones. Inside, the plates stay full. There's one more thing I hear. The door. It opens. On the threshold stands a boy. Young, eyes too wide, shoulders hunched. He wears a uniform from a war that came after mine. Different cut, different colors. Same fear. He hesitates. Behind him, a street that isn't San Martino. Neon. Asphalt. A glow from screens. The smell of exhaust. The woman with the ladle smiles, just a little. La tavola, serve tutti, she says again, in a voice that reaches farther than any artillery. The fork in my hand taps my plate 3 times. Tap, tap, tap. If you're still here when the credits fade and the room goes dark, pull up a chair and listen to the next story they bring to the table. For the men of Company B, 351st Infantry Regiment, and for the village that served dinner to both sides and remembered every dead man.